My question to you is, Reggie Wayne and Peyton Manning grew up together in this league. Reggie Wayne is a product of Peyton Manning as well as Peyton Manning being a product of Reggie Wayne.
Fair.
Okay? Marvin Harrison was there before Peyton Manning, right?
Fair.
Okay. And Wes Welker is the only other person that you named that has been a proven receiver before Peyton Manning was there. Demaryius Thomas? Yes, he was supposed to be good. How many first-round picks came out and were supposed to be good?
A lot of first-round picks came out supposed to be good.
So,
but Demaryius Thomas was good even when Tim Tebow was at quarterback.
Demaryius Thomas was okay when Tim Tebow was at quarterback. You can't really be good with Tim Tebow at quarterback.
What I'm saying is that when he got the ball, he not perform?
Yes, he did perform. But no 1,000-yard seasons have come from Demaryius Thomas yet. You cannot tell me that
Tim Tebow.
You cannot tell me that he's good when he hasn't done anything. Yes, everyone has the talent. Everyone in the NFL has the talent. That's why you're drafted, because you have the talent to be good. It's whether you're going to be good.
So you're trying to say that Peyton Manning didn't have good talent at wide? You're trying to tell me that if you look at Peyton Manning's talent and Dan Marino's talent, you think Peyton Manning's talent was worse than Dan Marino's?
No, I'm not saying it was worse. I'm saying that he makes his talent just as good as Dan Marino did. The players that you're talking about, other than Marvin Harrison and Wes Welker, were not proving players before Peyton Manning got them. Reggie Wayne came in with Peyton Manning. He became good with Peyton Manning.
You're right, but they helped each other, though.
Yes, they did help. They did help each other.
So Reggie Wayne's talent was helped by Peyton Manning, but Peyton Manning also was helped looking good. So they cancel each other out.
Yeah, okay. They don't cancel each other out because Peyton Manning has to throw to multiple different receivers. Reggie Wayne he catches it from one guy. So all the receivers technically get more from the quarterback than the quarterback gives to the receivers.
Yeah, but all the receivers also benefit from having other great receivers on the field as well.
So then
Marvin Harrison helps out. Dallas Clark helps out. Marcus
that goes
Pollard.
even more into the point that if there's so many receivers and Peyton Manning gets the ball to all of them, plus he puts up good stats, plus they have good stats, doesn't that say something about your quarterback more than the player?
It does say something about your quarterback. Exactly why. That if that doesn't translate into postseason performances, I have to knock you down a little bit. Because it's not like Peyton Manning has gone out and just had all these barn-burning games and then they still end up losing. He's played poorly in those playoff games.
What happens if you have 300 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, and your team loses by 3 points? Whose fault is that?
It's the team's fault. On your team's fault. But Peyton Manning has a lot of these playoff performances where he's in there. He's throwing for his 60% completions with 2 turnovers against that horrible game he played against the Chargers, where they lost. That the Chargers beat them in overtime. That horrible game against the Jets. He's had horrible games against the Patriots. He's had horrible playoff performances.
But
more so than the other.
All these games are high scoring. High-scoring games.
No, they're not.
Most of them have been high-scoring.
They only scored 20 points against the Chargers. They only scored 16 points against the Jets.
They had to go into overtime against the Chargers because
it was a low-scoring game. The defense actually played good in that game.
It was okay,
and we all know
they had to go into overtime. How's a
game.
bad game? If any game goes into overtime, that's not a bad game for anybody.
But he didn't perform well in that game, is what I'm saying.
He threw one pick in that game.
He didn't perform to all-time great levels. Like I'm talking Tom Brady had a playoff game where he only missed 1 receiver. Peyton Manning's never had a playoff game like that.
Neither did Dan Marino. Did not perform in playoff games because he didn't make the playoffs a lot of times. So if you're going to knock Peyton Manning for not doing well in the playoffs, knock Dan Marino for not getting to the playoffs because that's just as important as performing.
I can knock Dan Marino for not making the playoffs. That's why he's not as great as Joe Montana. And that's going to be another topic that we're going to.
But you're being hypocritical in your rankings.
So
if you're going to say Dan Marino
ahead of Dan Marino.
Either that,
but
or you have because basically
Dan Marino had way worse talent on his team than any of those quarterbacks that are in the top 5.
Okay, but when you brought Tom Brady into the equation, the first thing you said is that Peyton Manning has 1 ring, Tom Brady has 3. We all know this is a team game, and when you realize what the defenses had, yes, Peyton Manning had Bob Sanders, he won Defensive Player of the Year, but can you name any other great players besides
Dwight Freeney and Robert Mathis?
Yes, those 2. Those 3 players on a defense of 11
Gary
people.
Brackett.
Yes, he was a captain, but he wasn't a great player. He wasn't really an impact player. He made tackles, but there's a lot of linebackers. They make tackles. They make plays.
An impact player.
To an extent. Okay, now let's go to the Patriots defense. Let's see how many players they have on their team that make plays. They had Vince Wilfork, Richard Seymour, They had Eugene Wilson. They had Tyrone Poole. They had Ty Law. They had Lawyer Malloy, Rodney Harrison. I can keep going. And they had those players for multiple Super Bowls.
Teddy Bruschi.
That's not what I'm saying.
Teddy Bruschi.
What I'm saying is that
Mike Vrabel. They had their linemen and linebackers catching touchdown passes.
Games, Peyton Manning has had way worse performances in those games than those other people, regardless of what those defenses are doing.
Okay, but Tom Brady has also had bad games in the playoffs, and their defense lifted Tom Brady and that team up to win games.
In the early games,
for the Colts,
didn't have bad games. He didn't make mistakes.
Let's look at the playoff game from the Broncos last year. That was a good game. Peyton Manning did throw a costly pick, but the score was 35-35 at that time.
And Trent Howell had 2 return touchdowns in that game.
Okay, but then the rest of the score still had to come from somewhere. That means there's...
So the other 21 points?
Yeah, that means there's 3 other scorers that belong to Peyton Manning in that offense. That one pick, it should never come down to a pick when it's a 35-35 game.
But what I'm saying is that his offense scored 21 points and he made the costly interception. That's what I'm relating it to Brett Favre. Brett Favre would have similar games where he'd score in the 20-point range. To me, when you score 20 points, that's not having a great game if you're an all-time great quarterback. To me, if you're an all-time great quarterback, your team should be scoring in the 30s for,
Then we take out Dan Marino again. Everything that you're giving me,
but
Dan Marino's falling back.
Way less talent. That's what I'm saying.
Your talent. When it comes to the end of the day,
you have to correlate what talent you have on the field. Correct?
Yes, you
Peyton
do.
Manning had way better talent. Tom Brady had way better talent. Joe Montana had way better talent than what Dan Marino had to work with. So Dan Marino's pretty much won those games by himself. Won the game.
There's no game that you win by yourself in a game of football.
Pretty much
if
by
the lineman
himself.
if a lineman misses a block,
name great players on Dan Marino's teams right now.
Okay, I can't name great players.
Exactly, because he didn't have any.
If your lineman misses a block, no matter how good he is, your whole team pays for it, not just one person.
I understand that.
If Dan Marino gets you the ball and you don't make a play, a whole team pays for it. It doesn't matter how good you are or how bad you are. The whole team plays for any player that doesn't make the right read, the right play on any given game.
I know that, but if you don't make the right read, that is your fault, and that diminishes that's because of maybe a lack of what talent you have. Okay? So if you make a mistake in a critical moment when your team needs you to make a play, that says something about your talent level. So
Adrian Peterson was the worst running back in the year he led the league in fumbles.
Okay. I would say that.
I would not.
I would not. True statement.
I would not. How would you say that?
Well, he can't be the worst because he ran too, because he had yards too. If you had terrible yardage and a lot of fumbles,
how many critical fumbles did he have?
A lot. That's why I'd say that he wasn't the best running back.
That would diminish his talent a lot.
That's why I said he wasn't the best running back. But I said that by far he wasn't the best running back because you can't fumble the ball like that. I said that.
Okay.
I diminished Adrian Peterson for his fumbling years.
So then,
but then he fixed his fumbles, and now he's the best running back in the league.
So then Brett Favre can't be in the top 5 because he has thrown the most picks and he's fumbled the most times.
The only reason I said Brett Favre is because I can't think of I can't put anyone ahead.
But you're going to put the guy who's had the most turnovers in history. He has the most career fumbles out of any player.
In the top 5?
And he has the most,
I can't put Troy
interceptions.
Aikman ahead of Brett Favre. I can't put...
He has less turnovers. Same thing with Adrian Peterson.
Yeah, but what I'm saying, but Troy Aikman just... If you have just the mistakes, you have to correlate them with great plays as well. Troy Aikman doesn't have there's just you have the negative stats, you have to have positive stats too. What I'm saying is that Troy Aikman doesn't have as many positive stats as Brett Favre. We all know Brett Favre has...
What about John Elway? John Elway could fit in there somewhere.
John Elway, yeah, I could, but he
even
didn't
Drew
start
Brees
making
is
plays
getting
until
close.
he's getting up there, but he's still got to continue. But John Elway didn't really produce until he only had won his 2 Super Bowls his last 2 years. Before that, he wasn't really... I mean, he was a great quarterback, but he wasn't like doing anything above and beyond. Brett Favre has 3 MVPs to go on to his record, and there are other things that add Brett Favre just other than the fact that he leads in interceptions and fumbles and all those turnovers. But that's why I'm not putting Brett Favre at the top as number 1 of all time. I don't care how touchdowns he threw. He played for 30 years.